The Forgotten Bullet. How the curse of Khrushchev's son broke the Soviet system. In history, there are moments that seem like random flashes. They fade, and you forget. But it is precisely such flashes, like a spark in a powder keg, that sometimes explode entire eras. This story is just such a spark. It is about a son, a father, a dictator, and how the personal tragedy of one man became a point of no return for an entire country. Imagine November of 42. Somewhere near Stalingrad, a hellish meat grinder is underway. The fate of the world is being decided. And in the rear, in a relatively quiet place, a party is going on. Drinking, laughter, an attempt to forget the horror of war for at least a few hours. And so, at the table, a young, handsome pilot, the son of one of the most influential men in the USSR. He is drunk. Next to him is a military sailor, also not in his right mind. And a stupid, idiotic argument breaks out between them. A bet for a case of vodka or a couple of packs of American cigarettes. "I bet," says the pilot, "you can't shoot a bottle off my head with one shot." No, it was even more absurd and terrifying. "I bet," says pilot Leonid Khrushchev, "that I can shoot the bottle standing on your head." The sailor, drunk and daring, agrees. The bottle is placed on his head. Leonid takes aim with his TT pistol. His hand is shaking, his mind is clouded. A shot rings out, and he doesn't hit the bottle. He hits the sailor in the head. There it is, that fateful second. The clink of broken glass, but not of the bottle, but of someone's fate. A scream, blood, the dead silence that burst into the room instead of the hum of merriment. Leonid Khrushchev, the son of Politburo member Nikita Khrushchev, has just committed murder. A stupid, senseless, drunken murder. This scene is not just a tragedy. It is the key to everything that happened next. To the mystery that still haunts historians. To the revenge that lasted a decade. To the decision that perhaps became the first nail in the coffin of the Soviet Union. Are you ready to walk through this dark labyrinth? Then don't look away. The most terrifying part is ahead. Chapter 1. The Golden Boy with a Hole in His Biography. To understand the full horror and scale of what happened, you need to understand who Leonid Khrushchev was before that shot. He wasn't some backwater hooligan. He was a prince of the Soviet Empire. His father, Nikita Khrushchev, was climbing to the top at a frantic pace. From a simple miner to the leader of vast Ukraine, and then into Stalin's inner circle. Leonid grew up in an atmosphere of impunity and privilege. He was a rebel, a daredevil, a lover of women, drink, and thrills. But war changes everything. In February of 39, even before the main war, while being a pilot instructor in the Civil Air Fleet, he voluntarily enlisted in the Red Army. Why? Patriotism? Thirst for glory? Or just a new, even more dangerous adventure? I think it was all of the above. He studied at the prestigious Zhukovsky Academy, participated in the Soviet-Finnish War, made about 30 combat missions. Just think about it. 30 missions in that terrible, unknown war. That says something. The guy was brave. Recklessly brave. But even then, a trail of scandals followed him. The beginning of 41. Leonid, drunk, commits some serious offense. What exactly? The sources are vague. Perhaps a brawl, perhaps a crash. But the case was hushed up. The power of his name, his father's influence. The case was quietly closed, and Leonid avoided trial. This was his first serious warning, which he, as befits a daredevil, ignored. July 41. Leonid is at the front in bomber aviation. But his career is cut short again. At the end of the month, he receives a severe wound in the leg. Until March of 42, a hospital in Kuibyshev. Pain, fear, thoughts of death. But he pulls through, and instead of sitting out in the rear, he rushes back to the front. He is sent to a training regiment to retrain on the Yak-7 fighter. This is the elite. A fighter is not a bomber. It's one-on-one with the enemy. It's the sky, speed, mortal risk. And then, in the autumn of 42, having just left the hospital practically an invalid, but with a dream of the sky, he finds himself at that ill-fated party. And that shot happens. Economic and moral context. USSR, autumn 1942. Let's pause for a second and look at the country Leonid was living in at that moment. Stalingrad, a country on the brink. Industry evacuated beyond the Urals. People are starving, working 12 to 16 hours a day. The bread ration for an office worker is 4 to 500 grams. For a worker, a bit more. A total mobilization of all resources is underway. Every bullet, every ration, every plane counts. And at this time, the son of a high-ranking official is throwing drunken parties and killing a man over a stupid argument. Can you imagine the scandal if this became public? How would ordinary soldiers, dying in the Stalingrad hell, react upon learning that the golden youth lived like this? This was a blow to the very idea of a fair Soviet society. It was a spit in the face of millions of people enduring hardship. Therefore, the authorities' reaction was harsh, but predictable. Leonid is handed over to a tribunal. The sentence, 8 years in labor camps. Fair? More than fair. For drunken murder in wartime, they could have been executed. But then the main defender comes into play, the father. Chapter 2. The father's plea and the iron will of the leader. Nikita Khrushchev, in desperation, takes a step that was unthinkable in those years for a Politburo member. He goes to Stalin, personally, to beg. He does not justify his son. He admits his guilt, but he asks not for camps, but for a chance to redeem himself with blood. He asks to send Leonid to the front. What did Stalin feel at that moment? Cold calculation? Contempt? Or perhaps a grain of understanding? He was a father. His son, Yakov, had been in German captivity for a year by then, and Stalin had refused to exchange him for Field Marshal Paulus. He knew the price of personal tragedies on the scales of state necessity, and Stalin agrees. But his agreement is not a mercy. It is a political move. First, it demonstrates justice. You sinned, atone. Second, it puts Khrushchev in his great, unpayable debt. Third, he puts an invisible scope on Leonid. From now on, any misstep by the son will be a death sentence for the father's reputation. And here's what's amazing. Leonid is sent not to a penal battalion, where the condemned were usually sent to certain death. No, he is assigned to the 18th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment, the elite of the Air Force, senior lieutenant. As if nothing had happened. This was not a privilege. It was a time bomb. Leonid was now being watched very closely. He arrives at the regiment in December. 2.5 months. 28 training flights. 6 combats mission. March 11th, 43. His plane, a Yak fighter, does not return from combat mission. And the greatest mystery begins. Chapter 3. 3 versions of one death. Where did the prince disappear? From this moment, the story of Leonid Khrushchev splits into 3 parallel realities. Which one to choose is up to you. I will simply state the facts and speculations. Version 1. Heroic official under Khrushchev. Leonid Khrushchev, a valiant fighter pilot, fell heroically in an air battle with fascist vultures. His plane was shot down. He tried to make it back to his own lines, but crashed in no man's land. Thorough searches were conducted, but neither his body nor the wreckage of his plane was ever found. He remained forever listed as missing in action. Beautiful, patriotic, but too many buts. Why was he, the son of a high-ranking official, despite all the efforts of the regiment and partisans, never found? The command did not give up attempts, understanding the significance of the person. But 0. No traces. This is strange. Version 2. Treacherous, the most scandalous. Leonid did not die. He was shot down and captured. And there, frightened of death, he began collaborating with the Germans. Perhaps he was persuaded, perhaps he agreed himself. Learning of this, Stalin flew into a rage. The son of a Politburo member, a traitor? This is not just a disgrace. It is a blow to the image of the entire party. He gave the order to SMERSH, the Soviet military counterintelligence, legendary and merciless. A group of saboteurs managed to kidnap Leonid from a German camp and secretly bring him to Moscow. This story, told by General of State Security Udalov, really does read like a spy thriller. Next, a tribunal, charges of treason, and the only possible sentence, execution. Version 3, Criminal from Marshal Steigo. Less dramatic, but no less terrible. Marshal of Aviation Steigo, who knew Leonid personally, claimed that he was not a traitor. But he committed another serious crime, already at the front. What? Again, it's vague. Perhaps another drunken brawl? Perhaps going AWOL? It doesn't matter. The outcome is important. A military tribunal and execution. Notice, in versions 2 and 3, the ending is the same, execution by court verdict. Chapter 4, Tears and Knees. Khrushchev's final plea. And now, let's move to Stalin's office, where the fates of the world are decided, where distraught Nikita Khrushchev bursts in. Upon learning of his son's sentence, he drops everything and flies to Moscow. According to accounts by KGB General Dokhachev, the scene was humiliating and terrible. Khrushchev, a Politburo member, a powerful man, sobbing, begged Stalin for mercy. He crawled on his knees across the carpet, grabbed Stalin by the trousers, repeating, "I beg you, don't kill my boy. He will atone. He will fix everything." Imagine this scene. The iron Stalin, cold and impenetrable. And Khrushchev, sobbing, humiliated to the extreme. Stalin, caught off guard, retreats, but his decision is unshakable. He cannot cancel the sentence, but he gives one last, mocking mercy. He agrees to let the Politburo decide Leonid's fate. A meeting where Beria, Malenkov, Molotov, Kaganovich sit, all those Khrushchev had worked side by side with for years. And they, every single one, vote for execution. Leonid Khrushchev was executed. At that moment, something broke in Nikita Sergevich's soul. Finally and irrevocably, he didn't just lose his son. He went through the hell of humiliation. And he saw the faces of those who sent his boy to his death. He remembered every one of them. Economic analysis. The price of lawlessness for the USSR's economy. It would seem, what does this personal drama have to do with the economy? The most direct connection. After Khrushchev came to power in '56, under the slogan of de-Stalinization, a key event occurred. The CPSU Central Committee, headed by Khrushchev, forbade law enforcement agencies, including the KGB, from collecting compromising information on party, Soviet, and trade union officials. Do you understand the genius and horror of this decision? This was not just an act of revenge against the system that killed his son. It was a systemic failure. The party nomenclatura received an official indulgence. From now on, it became almost safe to steal, abuse one's position, and live a debauched lifestyle. The KGB was not even allowed to look in their direction. This violation of the principle of equality before the law became the cancerous tumor that began to eat away at the Soviet system from within. It gave birth to that very unpunished caste of the chosen, which 30 years later, in the 80s, drove the country's economy to stagnation and collapse. Ineffective managers, thieves, and corrupt officials, shielded by their party cards, were a direct consequence of that decision. Khrushchev, avenging his son, knocked out the main safety catch of the state machine. He created a system in which the power itself was above the law. And this, in the opinion of many analysts, became one of the main reasons for the fall of the USSR. Chapter 5, Cold Revenge. Settling the scores. Khrushchev waited for his hour. And when Stalin died in '53, and in '55 he managed to remove Beria, the hunt began. He went down the list. That very list of people who raised their hands for his Leonid's execution. Lavreny Beria, arrested in '53, accused of espionage and conspiracy. Executed. The case was fabricated, but Khrushchev got his way. Viktor Abakumov, Minister of State Security, the very one whose SMERSH perhaps kidnapped Leonid. Arrested under Stalin, but after Khrushchev's rise, his fate was sealed. The case was expedited. The trial was swift. Executed in December of '54. Georgy Malenkov, Vyacheslav Molotov, Lazar Kaganovich. The anti-party group. Exiled under strict supervision, removed from all posts. Humiliated and forgotten. He took revenge on everyone. Every single one. This was not a political purge. It was a personal, long-suffering revenge of a father who had carried pain and hatred in his heart for 10 years. But there was another, very dark story. Stalin's son, Vasily. After his father's death, he immediately found himself out of favor. He was ordered to leave Moscow. He refused. And then he, a lieutenant general of aviation, a war hero, was stripped of everything: his position, his pension, his right to wear his uniform. A month later, arrest. Charges: anti-Soviet propaganda. An absurd, fabricated charge. He was imprisoned, released, arrested again, and exiled to Kazan under a different name, where he soon died. Why did Khrushchev need this? To remove the last reminder of Stalin? Or was it the last, symbolic drop of revenge? As if to say, you killed my son, and I will rot yours away. We will never know for sure. But the coincidence is far too sinister. The curse of Leonid. So, how did Khrushchev's son die? The truth, it seems, is forever buried in the archives. Khrushchev himself, upon coming to power, did everything to destroy any compromising documents. Part of Leonid's personal file from March of '43 disappeared without a trace. But the undeniable facts remain. Khrushchev begged Stalin. Stalin refused. The Politburo voted for execution. And Khrushchev took revenge. He took such revenge that he changed the system of governance in the country, creating that very party mafia which ultimately buried the great empire. The fate of Leonid Khrushchev is not just a story about a drunken brawl and a tragedy in war. It is a parable about how the personal becomes political, about how a father's tear can change the course of history, about how lawlessness, even when motivated by pain and revenge, always breeds only new, greater lawlessness. This story has no end. It is still alive because it forces us to ask questions about power, about justice, about revenge, and about the price we pay for our actions. Friends, this story is just the tip of the iceberg. How many more such secrets do the Soviet archives hold? What do you think? Which version of Leonid's death is the truth? A hero, a traitor, or a victim of circumstances? Or maybe his father is to blame for everything for raising him that way? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments. Your thoughts are priceless to us. And if you want US to keep digging up such harsh and truthful stories, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and wait for new investigations. Together, we can do more.